That particular provision of the bylaw provides that the garaging or maintaining of vehicles, commercial vehicles basically, cannot take place unless they're garaged. And Mr. Nadaf appeared before us at the first hearing on the 18th of June and testified at length that he is a taxi cab operator. He owns his own cab, and he was parking his taxi as far into the driveway as he could. Mr. Nadaf has offered photographs of the driveway. Has testified that it's impossible to build a garage in the driveway, and he doesn't even own the residence. I think a friend or a relative of his owns the residence. So he was seeking relief because he'd looked for places to garage the vehicle in the vicinity, and none were available. And then he also testified he works very long hours, so it's very, very difficult for him to have the taxi vehicle a substantial distance from his residence. So we asked Mr. Nadaf to speak with Joseph Prondak, the building commissioner, who had issued a citation to Mr. Nadaf for violating the bylaw, and to see if there's some type of accommodation that could be made. We had a second hearing on July 23rd, 2014, and today is the third hearing and hopefully the last hearing on this application. Mr. Nadaf did file with the board at the time of the June hearing a petition signed by three of his neighbors asking the board to grant some type of relief to Mr. Nadaf under his peculiar circumstances. And so we accepted that. We have photographs of Mr. Nadaf, and so here we are. My name is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Board of Appeals. With me tonight, to my immediate left, is board member Nicholas Gray, and to my immediate right is board member Jeffrey Mullen. The rules of the board for this hearing are going to be the same as the last hearing. We'll hear from Mr. Nadaf. We see that Joseph Prondak, our building commissioner, is present, so we'll certainly hear from him. We'll hear from any other interested persons who wanted to be heard on Mr. Nadaf's application for variance. And then hopefully we'll be able to debate this particular application and vote on it one way or the other this evening. So without further ado, Mr. Nadaf, welcome back to the Board of Appeals. Do you want to come up here? And Mr. Prondak, do you want to come up as well? And come on up here, and you take one mic, and Joe will take the other mic. And
Are we supposed to let them know that we're live?
well, I think he knows we're probably being taped or something.
They don't show it like the other.
Yeah, the board doesn't like to see itself on
Good.
on TV very much. So, Mr. Prondak, do you want to bring us up to date as to where we are in this application?
Well, I've had a long discussion with Mr.
And let me
Milton.
welcome you to the Board of Appeals, and thank you for coming tonight. I know
My pleasure.
it's not easy for you to get to the Board of Appeals meetings.
Joe Prondak, Building Commissioner. I have had a long discussion with Mr. Nadaf. I have gone out again and looked at the property. It is a little bit unusual in its tightness and inability to accommodate a garage. It's a single driveway serving several vehicles on the right-hand side. And we talked about putting in a solid fence toward the back of the property that would block off this, that he could use to block off this one vehicle. And I relooked at the bylaw, and given the, it says that the bylaw says you can have one commercial vehicle if it is garaged. However, the bylaw does not define garaged. And I think that by enclosing this vehicle, I think that we will look at the possibility that by enclosing this vehicle, if the board chooses that it doesn't or cannot grant relief here, we'll look at the possibility of enclosing the vehicle with a fence, provided that he's diligent about making sure that it's always behind that fence. Because of the geographics of the property, it will achieve the same effect as a garaged vehicle. So that's the direction we're heading. We've had discussions about at this point
Okay,
in
and
time.
are you able to help us with the dimensions of the fence?
It would be a
How-
6-foot-high solid stockade fence.
Okay, 6 foot high.
Essentially, there is one there now. It's just not across the driveway, so that would go across the driveway. And then every time he parked there, he'd have to put it inside, and essentially, no one will see it.
Okay, and Mr. Nadaf, how was that suggestion to you? Totally fine. So were you able to do that within some reasonable period of time?
Yes.
And what is a reasonable period of time for you?
Like a couple weeks, 2 weeks.
30 days?
30 days. How about 30 days? Do you need to get the permission of the landlord to put a fence in the driveway?
But sir, it's already fenced. There is the house on the left, and there is a 6-foot fence on the right. All what I have to do, just like a gate, when I park the car on the driveway, just close the gate, but the fence is already there.
Okay.
And I own this part of the driveway by myself, all the way to the end, so I don't, and I have a good relation with my neighbors, so I don't think there is any issue with that.
Okay. Let me see if my colleagues have any questions. Mr. Mullen, do you have any questions of Mr. Prondak or Mr. Nadaf? Mr. Mullen has no questions. Mr.
No,
Gray?
no.
No questions. Okay. Since this is the third hearing on this matter, let me make a proposal and see if it's acceptable to my colleagues. What I'd like to propose is that you complete the fence to Mr. Prondak's satisfaction within the 30-day time period. And that what the board will then do is basically, you've got an appeal pending for a variance. And we discussed with you last time that you really don't have any technical legal grounds for a variance, okay? So what I'd like to do is to dismiss your appeal once your fence is up to Mr. Prondak's satisfaction, and would dismiss that without prejudice to your coming back here at some other time if there's any other difficulties that Mr. Prondak has or whatever. And in that way, the situation, I think, is under control. We're not granting variances to people that where there's really very little legal grounds or basis to grant the variance. We're not granting a special permit when a special permit wasn't applied for and really has no place here. And it's kind of an accommodation between Mr. Prondak as an interpreter of our zoning bylaw and Mr. Nadaf. And we're not creating any binding precedent that runs with the land or anything like that. And I kind of think that works to everyone's advantage. Do you have any comments on that, Mr. Mullen, or do you have another suggestion as to a preferred way of doing this?
I like that solution.
Okay.
That's sufficient. I like it as well.
How about you, Mr. Nadaf? Are you willing to go along with that? Okay, so what we'll do, and we'll enter a written order to this effect, we'll order you to complete the fence within 30 days to Mr. Prondak's satisfaction. And Mr. Prondak will then notify the board that he's satisfied, and will then issue a dismissal of your application, but without prejudice. That means if there's another dispute or something comes up, you can always come back to the board, and you're not prevented. You haven't given up your case. But what we've done here is we have a working accommodation between the town and you and your particular vehicle and your need for the vehicle, and it seems to work to everyone's satisfaction. Is that acceptable to you?
Yes.
Okay, well, great. Mr. Prondak, thank you very, very much for your time. We appreciate your time and attention on this application. I know it's taken a lot of work, and it's probably it is very worth it, because the town is very strict in enforcing this bylaw, and it's only in unique and highly particularized circumstances that would make this type of an accord, because we don't want to be dealing with people with dump trucks and other large vehicles, real commercial vehicles in the driveway. So under your particular circumstances, I think this is a fine result. Because if we push this to the legal limits, you'd be in real difficulty, okay? So thank you for attending all the hearings and being so good-spirited, and just make sure that the door is, the gate is closed when it should be closed. Good, thank you, sir. Thank you, Joe. Okay, well, we're going to adjourn this hearing. I'll prepare a short memo for the file.
Yeah. Take 3, 1 for each meeting.
Of 47, and we're going to call to order the 7:45 hearing of the Milton Board of Appeals. My name is Jeffrey Mullen. I'm acting as chairman for this hearing. To my immediate right is Stephen Lundbohm, board member, and to my immediate left is Nicholas Gray. This hearing is the third or perhaps fourth time we've convened on the matter concerning Eagle Farms upon the request to address issues raised by Joseph Prondak, the building commissioner of the town of Milton. I'm going to ask Mrs. Fitzgerald if you would just remind us, you don't have to do this now, but at some point, the dates of the prior hearings. I know the initial hearing was on June 12th.
And July 23rd.
So June 12th, July 23rd, and the site visit was another day? We had 2 hearings and 1 site visit, I think. So we've had 2 hearings and 1 site visit, and getting familiar with the faces, so most of the people in the audience were there, so you all know that, but for the people tuning in at home and for the record, I just wanted to acknowledge that we've done that. Now, since our last hearing, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that the applicant wasn't in the room. So Jason Sanatellis has just joined us. I apologize, Jason, I began the hearing without you. Do you want me to repeat all that? Yeah. Okay. Let me see. So since at our last hearing, we took testimony, and the board indicated that we didn't feel prepared to rule on the matter pending the receipt of some information that we've requested. We also took it upon ourselves to review the full record of the use of the property dating to the 1960s, and we've assembled that record, and that's available, and I think I've already thanked Mr. Prondak for pulling together some materials for you, so we're familiar with the history. More recently, on September 7th, 2014, we received a letter from Jack Carpenter, who's a direct abutter and who has been at the hearings previously. And I think I want to read the letter into the record because we just got the letter and maybe people don't know about it, if that's okay. To the Board of Appeals, my name is Jack Carpenter. I reside at 129 Harborview Road, a direct abutter to Eagle Farms. I was unable to attend the previous Board of Appeals meeting due to work requirements. This past April, although he was at least one of the hearings and I think was at the site visit as well, because I know we've met Mr. Carpenter. 135, okay. Joe letter. 135. This past April, there was a fire at Eagle Farms that caused significant damage to the fence bordering my property. This was a very scary day for the neighbors, especially us as direct abutters. Our yard was filled with smoke, ash, and burning embers. My concern is that the mulch is stored right on the lot line bordering my property. This is a safety concern for my family and home. Mr. Sanatellis, owner of Eagle Farm, had promised to water the mulch to prevent further fires. We would like confirmation that this is being consistently done and enforced. If mulch is allowed to be stored, I would like to see it at least 20 feet away from my lot line and height not to exceed the height of the concrete barriers. There are real safety concerns here that need to be addressed. The mulch is my main concern. I request the board have this mulch or other materials moved away from the close proximity to my home. Other than safety concerns related to the presence of the mulch, we are also concerned about open access from Eagle Farms and our property. We would like to see a fence built to close off access of people to enter our property from Eagle Farms. Jack Carpenter, 135 Harborview Road. So thank you, Mr. Carpenter, for your letter. We'll put that in the record. I'd like to invite Mr. Sanatellis and his representatives to the table, and we'll continue taking testimony in the hearing, and then at the conclusion of that, I think the board is prepared to deliberate. Mr. Sanatellis, let me ask you, welcome to the Board of Appeal.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. Sorry to hear about your father.
Thank you.
And I think that goes for the other members as well. The first question is, did you bring a site plan to the meeting?
Good news, I did.
Great. Would you mind walking the board through the site plan and tell us a little bit about what that plan shows?
Sure. Put one up.
Whatever you'd like, whatever your pleasure. So do it in a way that the people in the audience can see, as most of those are abutters, if you don't mind. Is this the first time you folks have seen this as well? Okay, so, okay.
Would you like a copy?
No, it's okay, whatever you, I don't know, Steve?
So, I would like to start off by thanking everybody for coming tonight. I know how valuable everybody's time is, and thank you. I also want to apologize for not having a plot plan last meeting, but good news, I have it tonight. I want to state that my neighbors, my abutters, my customers are very important to me, and I will do whatever I can to help mitigate any noise, dust that may come from anything that Eagle Farms does. I worked with Karen Goslin from CMG Design and a couple other people, and we came up with some proposed notes and goals that I think will help with the neighbors. First, I'd like to start the back of 1146, the rear property line. Right now, there is existing evergreens. Arborvitae's is the name. They're about 40 feet tall. We're proposing to add a stockade fence along the back side of that property. Something unusual, the deer came this year, ate the bottom half of the arborvitae's, and they did not grow back. So I think putting a fence there will help with any noise, dust, etc. Also, in the right corner of the lot line, we're proposing to install a 15-foot Norway spruce that can eventually grow 40 to 50 feet, approximately 3 feet a year. Again, that will also help for any noise or dust. Last meeting, we discussed about a no plant line, if you will, 15 feet from the side, 20 feet from the rear. We wrote that in as well. Moving forward, down towards the mulch.
I'm sorry, Jay. Would you mind if we had questions while we...
Absolutely.
Is that better?
Whatever's easier for you guys.
When you say no plant line, you mean no storage of plants?
Correct. Yeah. So.
A buffer.
As a buffer.
And is there one on the other side as well, in the back?
The back side and the right side, like an L shape.
It would be a setback, as if it were a building
Exactly.
setback. Okay.
Currently, we're allowed to use the property. I'm not positive that that it goes all the way, but I know Mr. Prondak thought it would be a good idea to stay 15 feet from the side and 20 feet from the rear.
You want to come up, you want to sit here? You mind? Thank you. Okay.
Moving down towards the mulch.
currently have 3 mulch bins. We're proposing, and right now, there was some damage done to the fence that we had installed a few years ago to the previous owner. We did install new sections of the fence. Now we're proposing to install 13 along the backside green giant arborvitaes. When we install them, they'll be 10 to 12 feet tall, planted. They too grow 3 feet a year, and they grow upwards between 30 to 40 feet. Great, again, to mitigate any noise, dust, visual. Behind the first mulch bin, Karen came up with the idea of putting 2 flowering pear trees. There'll be 3-inch in caliper, which is the width of the tree, the diameter of the tree. They probably will stand 14 to 15 feet tall. I did bring pictures of the 2 evergreens and trees that we're proposing to plant.
Was that Bradford there?
Cleveland, Bradford, Aristocrat. Moving forward, down the right side of the mulch bin, there's some existing cypresses about 20 feet tall. We want to continue that screening by adding 10 more green giants, arborvitaes, 10 to 12 feet tall. Then adding a stockade fence on the right side of that. Again, this is all to help mitigate the noise and the dust.
So height on the stockade fences?
We have 8 feet on the plan.
Is it 8 uniformly?
It is.
So anytime you say stockade fence, we can assume an 8-foot solid wood stockade fence?
Correct. The rear section, she has a 6-foot stockade fence.
Except in the rear?
Exactly. But adding 2 more feet to that fence is not an issue. Further, the mulch. We're going to install a irrigation system along the back side of the mulch, 2 heads per bin. Each sprinkler head sprays 9 gallons of water per minute. We can put that on a timer. It can go on every half hour, every hour, depending on how hot it is, depending on the time of the year. This will keep watering the mulch down, will keep the moisture, control the dust. And these will be a raised irrigation above the bins. That's what we have proposed to help with anything that Eagle Farms is causing as far as noise and dust.
So let me ask you a few questions, if it's okay. Everything you said, is that incorporated in the notes and goals on
Yes.
your... All right.
Yes.
So if the board was to, and its pleasure, to incorporate each and every one of these conditions into some type of order, you would have no objection to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. If you were to put the 6 or 8 foot stockade fence up, would you then have satisfied Mr. Carpenter's request to have fencing along each of the points at which you abut a neighboring property?
I didn't know about...
That was your request. Is that right?
The request is that the piles move back to the property.
No. The second request, a
Oh,
fence
yeah,
built
yeah.
to close off access.
Yeah, and really on the, where the trees are, on the side. On the other side of the mulch piles. So
Yeah.
you're walking up towards the mulch piles on the right-hand side back.
So he was proposing a fence there.
Right.
And then so the question is whether or not there's a perimeter fencing between your property, in addition to that fence, is there a perimeter fencing between your property and your
There
neighbors?
isn't, but we'd be more than happy to put it in. This is the first time that I heard that Jeff wanted the fence there, but not an issue on our part. That's
Can you point to where that would be, Jason?
right around here.
Is that where you would like it, Mr. Carpenter? Where Jason just pointed?
I'm trying to understand the map.
Jason just pointed was this line here.
Where's my question?
It's not on that plan, but I have it on the,
Right behind the mulch pile there. You're up here.
Jack, right? So this, you want to...
I don't want to negotiate like this.
We actually, the fence is here.
Oh, that's what you just built?
Yeah. So you want to close that off, so there's no access to the backyard.
Well, I think, really what we'd like is, your flowers and trees are over here, or is it, are they here?
There's some storage, we use this for overstock for some plants. We do have some, or there has been some plants installed years ago up in this area. But I think what you're thinking of, I think what you're saying is you just want to close off, so where we added the fence behind the mulch,
Yeah.
you want to close that off, because Chuck and Carol's fence goes all the way up, then my fence, and then we can continue that fence, so it'll be square.
Yeah, but I'm concerned also about this area here, the plants, fence going across.
Okay, we are going to put a fence here, we're proposing.
Okay, yeah, because I just don't know who's back there looking at the stuff, I don't know who's back there picking the stuff, and I got kids, I got swing set right now, 10 feet on the other side of that.
The fence there is not an issue on that.
So just kind of close off everything with,
All right, so let's open up this hearing to more than just the two of you, all right? And can you explain what you were just describing so that everyone can understand?
Sure. I'm going to do it up here.
Yeah.
Is that all right, this one? We just installed the new fence.
Those are the fences that we saw when we were on the site tour.
On the
You had
back
them.
side
Yeah,
of the mulch.
yeah, yeah.
Chuck and Carol are in this area, and there's a fence going all the way down.
Yeah, that's the fence that burned.
There's a section here with some trees that have been planted 25 years ago. There's a little bit of an access to get into Jack's yard. We're talking about putting a fence from the mulch bin to the property line. So it would create a square.
Okay. So then the question is, if you were to do that, is it accurate to say that there will be some type of perimeter fencing around your property with each of your adjacent neighboring residential properties?
Yes.
Okay.
May I ask a question for clarification purposes? Several years ago, on the back fence of our property, we actually installed a gate to allow the neighborhood kids to
Did we use it when we were up there? We appreciate that. Because you were under the weather that day, as I recall.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
We're not going to get into that right now, but,
Does what we're talking about satisfy Jack's request in terms of requiring Jason to perimeterize his fencing, cause a problem with the gate?
I don't think so. I mean, if the gate closes, I think that's probably what he's concerned about is people cutting through. I don't know, maybe Jack can speak for himself, but,
they're not cutting through my yard.
yeah, no, it's his yard, yeah.
I think the door over there is fine.
It'd be okay.
Yeah, well, just clarification.
Fair enough. Could you just ask those folks to just, if they're going to have a conversation, they could just have it a little bit down the hallway? Thank you. Well, if we're forced to shut the door, and I don't think people want that. Is that yours?
No.
Let's see. When you, the one other question I have is, on the location of the bins, are those as existing?
Yes.
Are they, what's the distance between each of those bins and the property line?
Approximately 7 feet from the property line, from the rear, and on the property line.
But that's your property?
That's my property, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not 20? On that plan, it's not 20? Is that right?
1126 and 1146.
No. The distance from the
yes.
bins to the property line is not 20
It's not
feet?
20 feet.
And could it be made to be 20 feet?
Pushing it down 20 feet, we'll lose the access to the existing barn. We could move it down 5 feet, 8 feet.
So that it will be what? 12 or
7, 8,
15?
So 7 is, 14, 15 feet from the property line, from the rear of the property line.
Okay. Any questions of other members of the board, Mr. Senator?
Can I say one more thing,
Jason.
Mr. Mullen? Just finding out that Mr. Carpenter Jack wanted that mulch pushed forward, adding another concrete block on top of the existing bins would help keep that mulch from spilling on his property, etc. So that's another option, that we could build the bins one block higher.
How high is that, the blocks now? Do you know, offhand?
Approximately,
7, 8,
I was going to say 6 feet.
6 feet?
Other questions, Nick?
Steve? Are those concrete blocks, or is that just a reinforced wall?
Concrete blocks, interlocking, concrete companies came up with this, they fit into each other.
So it wouldn't entail, a major construction project to go back, would it?
It wouldn't be major, it would be a couple-day project that we could do. My only concern is, losing the access to the barn.
But as proposed, you'd have 8-foot fencing, you'd have screening by way of the giant arborvitae, and about what do we say, an existing 8-10-foot buffer.
Just pictures of the screening. Those are the Green Giants. Those are the Cleveland Piers.
Make sure that people, these are stock photos.
Stock photos.
Yeah.
Mine will look better than those.
Well, I can see they're deer-proof.
Yeah.
Let me, are you all set? Okay. I have a whole series of questions that I'd like to get to during the conversation about the permit itself. Let me, Steve, you have other questions?
Not right now.
Nick?
No.
Mr. Prondak, do you have any questions of Jason Sanatellis or his representatives?
I don't at this point.
Okay, can I ask if anybody in the audience has a question about what they've heard? The reason, let me just explain to you where we are in this hearing. So we've been taking testimony. This is our third night of testimony. We're trying to get to the end of the testimony so that we can begin to deliberate on what we've heard. We're going to do that tonight, it seems. So if anybody has anything else they want to offer the board for the board's information before the board begins to deliberate, now's the time. And I'll invite anybody who'd like to add anything to the record to do so if they'd like to right now. Hearing none. Oh, yes. You just let us know who you are and where you're from, and I'll welcome you to the Board of Appeals.
I'm Georgia Lee, and I'm just so impressed with the Hill Farms as a community partner with so many.
You're from Milton?
I am from.
Okay, fine.
I live on Highland Street.
Highland Street, okay.
And Jason has been incredibly generous to a lot of charities in town, as everyone probably knows. He's allowed the Milton Garden Club to do projects that we do throughout the town. He provides us mulch all the time for our gardens at almost no cost. I think that healthy businesses make healthy communities. I love this plan that he has to mitigate the problems that he's had. And based on this, I can't see a reason why he couldn't continue as he's been doing. I would be very sad to see Hill Farms business not have mulch to be part of it.
Okay, Ms. Lee, thank you very much. You're welcome. Anybody else? Mr. Prondak?
Just one comment slash question I would like to make, because I am the one that will take the calls, or does take the calls for the complaints, and what I haven't heard at this point is mitigation of the noise from the trucks in the back of the Bobcats. And I think that's a good percentage of.
We're going to get to that. Yep, absolutely. It took it that he didn't have anything else to add, but if you have something else to add, we could hear that on that. You want to talk about it later? Okay, we're now going to, okay, so we'll close the evidentiary portion of the hearing and we'll begin to deliberate. The open meeting law requires that we deliberate in open session, and as Mr. Leonard is fond of saying, we will do that right here and now. So as the acting chairman, I want to make a couple of comments, and then I'd like to open up the conversation to my board members. And I'd like to, Mr. Prondak, if you don't mind, engage you a little bit in this portion of the hearing. It's a little bit unusual hearing, but it's an unusual case, and we've all collectively spent a lot of time on this. So, first of all, I appreciate everybody's time and attention. I know that everybody has other lives, and people have stuck with this through a couple, 3 hearings, plus a site visit, and that to me indicates the importance of Eagle Farms to the town, to the neighborhood, for better or worse. I mean, we've heard lots of testimony. I would say in the main, most of it was positive. I think there are some, and I, as the acting chairman, have some concerns that I have expressed, and that we have heard tonight. But my overall sense is that that this is a workable situation, and that it's one that the town undertook beginning in 1963, and the record shows that over a long period of time it has steadily intensified the use of the property for nursery and garden supply location. Much of it for the good, but there's no question that that's what's happened. And the reason I say that, and that's why I wanted the plan, is because I want the record of this hearing and this series of meetings to be very clear about what's permitted on the property and what's not, so that the next time we won't have to pour through the old records and things like that, and everybody will know exactly what we have and what we don't have. So that's a little bit about what's framing my thinking. I know I'm looking at you, but I'm talking to the board members. And what I'd like to propose is a couple things. I'd like to ask my fellow board members if they'd like to make a comment about anything, and then I'd like to discuss right here in public some conditions around what I would call an amended and restated special permit, completely restating the 2008 special permit that you were granted. That would be very consistent with the testimony we've heard and the concerns we've heard from each of the neighbors, and that I hope will update it to reflect the current use of the property as we know it today, including the most recent conditions and concerns expressed by Mr. Carpenter, but also entered into the record previously by the other folks who've taken their time to come out. And so procedurally, that's what I would recommend. And now I'd invite my fellow board members to, and it could be that we will want people to take some time to take a look at what we've done. I think it's that important, including the applicant and the building commissioner, to see what we've done. And this is not about lobsters, but I don't want any confusion about whether lobsters are permitted to be sold at the property. And we're not going to argue about, what, in my opinion, I don't want any concerns about the size of the pots and the definition of produce and some of the things that I think have been a little bit confusing in the past. We know what's up there, and that's why we did the site tour. And we know the concerns about the mulch pile and the fire, and we were lucky enough to have the fire chief up there to help us out. So those are my thinking. Mr. Gray, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think what you said is well spoken. I just would like to come out of this, as I think I've said before, with a new special permit that takes into account the concerns of the neighbors, but is also clear enough to be enforceable by our building commissioner, and also allows Jason to carry on the business in some kind of profitable way. So I'm eager to talk about your draft here and start working on it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Jason, it's a fantastic plan, and it's what we were looking for. And you can see just by virtue of the fact that he brought it, presented it, it sort of moved the ball forward a great deal, I think. I mean, I think it answers the concern about the mulch and the dust and maybe some of the noise issues. One of the things that sort of struck me in these 3 meetings is that far and away there's been overwhelming support for you and the operation by the neighbors. You've got a couple of abutters who raised some very legitimate issues, as they have the right to do. And I think it's commendable to everybody involved here that we put our heads together and tried to get to a solution. I think we can get there. As I think Nick has said previously, this thing is eminently resolvable with some compromise. Again, I think we haven't heard from some of the most affected abutters in terms of what their impression of the plan is, but from my point of view, it answers and resolves many issues. I think we still might have to tweak some issues in terms of what we talked about with Mr. Prondick's concern about noise and backhoes and front-end loaders and so forth. And we've sort of put together some notes, and a few more T's have to be crossed and I's have to be dotted, but I don't think it was anybody's overall intention at any time to shut you down, and I don't see that happening in any shape or form. So I think if we just continue to work our way through this, we'll get to where we think everybody can be in agreement and live and move forward and have a happy and healthful, successful Eagle Farm.
So you are now operating under a 2008 special permit that was granted for a 10-year period, expires in 2018. You are here because there were complaints lodged to the building commissioner, and the building commissioner requested our assistance in interpreting certain of those conditions. I have suggested, and I think the board agrees, that after taking the testimony, it's appropriate to completely amend and restate, but I don't think extend the special permit. We're not proposing a new 10-year special permit. Although we can talk about that, there was no testimony on the extension of it, and it seems to me that it's appropriate now, given the information that we have, to simply amend and restate the 2008 special permit as if, and continue to have it expire 10 years from when it was initially issued. In other words, 3 or 4 years from whenever it is. It was issued on October 30th, September 30th, 2008, so it expires on September 30th, 2018. My proposal would be that it continue to expire on that date. Now, let me say this. What I'd like to do is walk through the special permit as we are, and have suggestions on how to amend that. To Board Member Lumbaum's suggestion, I don't think, given the importance of this to the public, I don't think the public is going to have an adequate opportunity to provide feedback on the conditions tonight, because nobody's seen the plan. The notes are important, because the notes are just as if they were part of the special permit. So one thought I had was, we can do some writing. We can see if we could provide this, maybe, I don't know how robust the town's website is, but it might be nice to provide a draft on the web, let people comment on it and come back and conclude the hearing. I don't know if that's too involved. I mean, that's how permit granting authorities do it sometimes, but that's one suggestion. I'm happy to take other suggestions procedurally, but I don't know how else to have appropriate input on important conditions that people took their time to do. And And because we're not negotiating now, but we're suggesting and we're having conversations about how to reflect in writing what we've heard in testimony, and to get it right once and for all. So that's one way to do it, especially given the importance of the plan. The other thing to do is to provide copies at Town Hall. People can come get them. I don't know, you could email it. Okay, all right. So let's park that issue and let's, so the proposal is to amend and restate the special permit and to supersede its terms completely so that we don't have to refer to it back. I know that's what happened in 2008 as well. This will be a comprehensive rewrite. I will assure you of that. So that's the first proposal. Does that sound right, Mr. Barry?
Yes,
Procedurally?
it does. I would just ask the board, however, to keep an open mind about the possibility, given how far we've come, of giving us a new 10-year permit as we received in 2008.
One step at a time. We take one step at a time at the Board of Appeals in Milton. Fair enough. Item 1 really is just a general statement about what's permitted to be used here. I want to reinforce and I want to tell you, to Mr. Lumbaum's point, this is a special permit that's being issued to Eagle Farms. This is not run with the land, right? This is your permit. And part of it is based on the goodwill of you and your family over the long period of time. And that goodwill is important. And that's the nature of the special permit. So the special permit will say, the applicant may use the premises, not the premises may be used for. That's an important distinction that I want everyone to know. All right? Stop me if I'm overstating the case. I think we should specifically incorporate the uses and the layout that is set forth on this site plan, which we were, as Steve put, were greatly anticipating, and we're glad that you took the time. But I'd like to take the time to study it because I'm very interested in the notes. And I'd like, and maybe even you could revise it to incorporate the conversation you had with Mr. Carpenter. I think the fence should be uniform in height. You know, we've said we're not, it just seems to me that that's right. And I think you should make an effort to pull those bins back as far as you can to maintain your turning radius within reason. And that will save us a lot of writing if we can incorporate that. But I'll tell the neighbors, that's what it should look like. We have an old plan in the record from the 70s, and there's been an updated plan, and you know, the testimony has been that backyard in your neighboring property was not really intensively used. You know that, and then become more intensely used. So this special permit would permit that, but we wouldn't have to rely on the older plans and the older photos. And I think that's been an issue for you, Mr. Prondak, in the past. So I'd like to propose a specific condition right in there that we incorporate this site plan by reference and make this a part of the record. Let's see. Let's see if I can read this. I'd like to suggest that large quantities of firewood may not be stored on the property. You already are subject to that condition. Actually, let me say this. You have a condition in your property that permits you to sell Christmas trees and firewood, but you can't have large quantities of firewood. You testified that you have firewood in connection with your retail trade, and that you're not wholesaling firewood out of your property. I'd like to have a condition, I'd like to suggest that there be a condition that large quantities of firewood intended for retail sale may not be stored on the premises and shall be limited to quantities sufficient to focus on the retail clientele of the business. Now, I'd like to specifically not define what that is. I'm looking at you, Mr. Prondak, since you're the enforcing authority. But I think the intention is there. You're not wholesaling firewood, people. And the reason I think that's important is it goes to the comment about trucks and coming and going and who's coming. You know, you have as part of your retail operation the ability to sell firewood, and you have the ability to store firewood in connection with the retail operation. so long as it's not a large amount of firewood that would be consistent with a wholesale operation. If that doesn't work, we will limit it, but I haven't heard any testimony, I don't know how to limit it, I don't think the board knows how to do that. So that's a suggestion. I'd like to suggest that we continue to permit you to use the property for holiday lighting, limited to string lights and light towers not more than 16 feet in height so as to not interfere with neighboring residential properties. That's an existing condition. We may just clean up the language. You would be permitted to use the premises for Christmas trees, bedding plants, flowers, trees, plants, and shrubs used in connection with the nursery business between April 15 to June 30, September 15 to September 30, and November 15 to December 31, just like you currently have. Okay? And the reason and then I would say the stock may not be, trees, plants, and shrubs may not be more than 12 feet in height and must be maintained in pots which are not larger than 3 feet in height.
I have a question about
This is the issue you raised.
Yes.
Yeah,
A lot of trees are simply
they're just root balls,
balls.
right?
There are no pots involved, and they're...
Okay, so this is a dual condition. The way that I read this, the way your old special permit read, you had two conditions. One said the trees couldn't be higher than 12 feet, and another said the trees couldn't be in pots greater than 3 feet. And some were interpreting that, and it wasn't exactly written that way. It read like maybe your trees couldn't be higher than 3 feet. And it raised the question of whether or not trees that were not in pots could be on the premises, which is, the way I would read the new condition is, trees not in pots could be on the premises so long as they're not higher than 12 feet. And if they're in a pot, the pot has to be not bigger than 3 feet. No?
Well, I was wondering whether the part of that sentence that says it must be maintained in pots that are not larger than 3 feet in height, is that even relevant? I mean, do we hear any testimony that pots are an issue?
Only from Mr. Prondak.
Well, I think he was trying to define what the pot was. I mean,
That's
if we
right.
just took, it seems to me that if perhaps it could just be that we don't want any any trees or plants or shrubs higher than 12 feet, period. Leave it at that. Take out the stuff about the pots.
We didn't talk a lot about the height
mean,
of
we
the
didn't talk-
stock.
Yeah.
But what we're saying, what the board is saying, I think is fair to say, is if there wasn't testimony on the matter, we're not here to disrupt that item. And so we're not imposing a new condition. We're trying to clarify the language that was confusing to the building commissioner. It would be reasonable, good suggestion, if there's not a problem, if the real issue is the size of the stock and not the height of the pot,
I don't even know what that means.
maybe the pot. It's-
No, I know, but I mean,
Been-
we're talking about the trees, if we're talking about something that's as big as 12 feet tall, right? Generally, that's going to be in a root ball, not in a pot of any size, right?
So the suggestion is to limit the stock to 12 feet in height.
Yeah, I'm just throwing, and get rid of the,
Okay.
yeah. This is pots like container, not anything else. Never mind.
Okay, you are currently, and you will be in the future, limited to, you cannot move the premises, you cannot move the stock through the use of any form of bobcat or front-end loader. That's a current condition. Okay. There's a lot of testimony about use of the bobcat on the premises. And heavy machinery. You're currently limited from using bobcats on Sundays before noontime. I'd like to expand that to other heavy machinery. And the front-end loaders, and not to be left idling or unattended, okay? We're getting to the mulch. I know the mulch is the issue. Okay. We had a lot of discussion about the deliveries of the mulch. We talked to you about a delivery schedule. We gave us a delivery schedule. I looked at the delivery schedule, but I'm not sure I completely understand how it works. The question is whether or not you would be willing to limit the total number of deliveries of mulch to the property any 1 week. And the size of any one single delivery. Now, I don't know that that matters, the size of the delivery, but the testimony was that there are a lot of trucks coming and going, and there's a lot of trucks coming and going and backing up and making a lot of noise and bothering the neighbors. So one of the issues is deliveries of the mulch to the property, and the other issue, I think, is the amount of mulch that's at the property at any one time. So we didn't have a lot of testimony on that, but I wonder if the way to do that is to limit the total number of deliveries per week. That's possible. And is that something you want to think about?
I would love, yeah, please.
Okay.
Or limiting the number, or could we maybe suggest certain days to have the mulch deliveries happen?
We could do that. We could also limit the number of, the times during the day when it is delivered. Currently,
They deliver after 9 a.m. currently.
yeah. How about later than?
No later than 4 p.m.
Does that sound right to you? Or is that, I'm looking at, do you, yeah, do you,
I don't know how that affects, helps us out with the volume and the noise and the dust and the beating and the dog, and whether it comes in on Monday or Friday.
what about the time of the day?
Yeah, the later the better.
Later in the day, the better?
I don't think it addresses our main concerns.
Which is volume.
It's a volume.
Is there an ability to limit the total number of yards of mulch at the premises at any one time? We had a lot of testimony about the size of those mulch piles. And I'd like to recommend that, I agree with, the single best way to limit the amount of mulch being pulled out of there is to limit the amount of mulch that's at the premises at any one time. It also addresses Mr. Carpenter's concern about the mulch piles not being higher than the bins as a safety precaution. I believe that was the issue. So,
That, Jeff,
yeah.
the 2000 special permit limited the amount of mulch to 125. The 2008 was silent on
It
that.
was, yeah, yeah.
So you could infer that it's still 125. I guess.
Well, I think the problem with it is we heard from Mr. Prondak that the 2008 superseded every other. So I took from it that there was testimony to eliminate that condition. That's not to say that, we're back to the same point. I'd like to get at what the limit total amount of yards of mulch is. The issue with this hearing has been the mulch. And what we're probing is a limitation on the number of deliveries, the time of deliveries, and the total amount of mulch at the premises at any one time. And then lastly, the period of time during the year when you will have mulch there. The reason I say that is this is going to be watered. And occurs to me that there's not going to be mulch there all year round. So we ought to work on that. I don't know what your season is, but you don't have a seasonal limit now. And I'd like to suggest that you have one. So in terms of the items for the mulch, I'm suggesting limiting the number of deliveries, limiting the size of the deliveries, conditioning the time of the deliveries, limiting the number of yards of mulch stored at the premises at any one time and the period of time during the year that it can be there. Pulling the mulch back, I suggested 20 feet because that was in Mr. Carpenter's letter, but you should work on that. Keeping it within the barrier and keeping it continuously wet by use of an automatic sprinkling system approved by the Town of Milton's building commissioner are the recommended conditions that I have for the mulch. I'd like to ask either of the members or the building commissioner if they have anything to add to that.
I would ask Jason, do you have any comment? I guess my thought was on the issue of limiting a year-round presence of mulch. How does that affect you? What's your thoughts on that?
Definitely affects us. The mulch season in general is April, May, and June. Then the mulch sales go down. But if I can only offer mulch April, May, and June, I could only offer mulch April, May, June, and then July through April, I'm not allowed to have it on premise.
No, what prompted this concern is there's no way I didn't think those sprinklers were going to be working when it's cold.
Sure.
So, and therefore, if we're going to require you to keep the mulch continuously wet, you're probably not going to have mulch there, so therefore we should limit the period of time that mulch should be on the property, and so that neighbors will know, okay, it's mulch season. I'm not suggesting that we're trying to strike a balance here.
There's times at the end of the year that we may have 10, 15 yards of mulch left over for this season.
End of the year is when? Whose year?
October, November, going into the Christmas time, and we usually take that mulch and lay it, level it off to store Christmas trees on top.
I see. I mean, so.
We don't tend to store piles of mulch throughout the winter.
Another way to look at this is to do what you've done in the past with stock, which is you can have a certain amount of yards of mulch during your high season and a lower amount of mulch other period of time. But what we don't want to do is have a condition in here that requires you to keep it continuously wet, and then you have it not being continuously wet. Then I'll have another hearing on Eagle Farms. We've had enough of those.
We would keep it wet during the warm season, right?
I don't know. I don't know that. I don't know. I don't know. I'd ask the chief if that's right. I don't know. Maybe that is right. Maybe you have to ask him that. I know that he does not want it covered, and the old condition was that it be covered, and I understand why it was covered. But he testified at that walkthrough that he didn't want it covered. So we don't want it covered, but we want it safe.
Sure.
And it seems to be in a lower quantity. If it's 10 yards, I think the risk is very low. But at the yards that you've got and you had there the day that we were there, especially if it's a hot day, it could be higher. So maybe that's just another issue we'll have to work on. But there's a couple of ways around it. I think I agree with Mr. Lombard. We should go back to a capacity constraint, which will limit the overall activity. And I think we should break it down by season. But we need to better understand your seasons. So, does that make sense to you, Mr. Prondak?
It does. My concern, however, about simply limiting the amount of mulch, and you may already have this in mind, we don't want to create a condition that lends itself to just speed up the operation. So in other words, he's limited to 125 cubic yards of mulch. So I get my 125 yards and I get all my landscape contractors to come in 3 days and move it out, and then I get another 125. So I'm never going over the 125, but now I'm...
Well, we're trying. We've suggested as an additional condition that there can't be more than X number of deliveries per week.
Right.
And no single delivery in more than X number of yards.
So you said you want to reiterate
Yeah,
that
fair
in
enough.
concert with all that other...
Maybe what I'll do is finish with the conditions and we come back to the mulch. You're currently limited, you cannot use the property for chainsaws after 9 o'clock p.m. You cannot use the premises for any commercial landscaping operation. It's not in your current permit, but it is the law, and I think it should be in this permit, given the testimony that we've heard. Not later than a date certain. I would suggest November 15th. Maybe that's too soon, given the calendar we're currently working on. We would require you to install a wooden perimeter fence not less than 8 feet in height along each boundary of the premises that abuts a residential property. That's what Mr. Carpenter had asked, and I think the testimony, I mean, it seems like you're going beyond that with the interim fence. You would be permitted to continue to use the property for horticultural uses and incidental landscaping materials for retail sale. There's currently a commercial provision in there, but I think that the overwhelming testimony was the retail. And those were the pavers that you had expressed some concern about. Is it accurate to say you're retailing the pavers?
We retail and do some very small wholesaling.
Well, my suggestion was, just like the firewood, to discuss pavers, post beams, bricks, and other landscaping materials from a retail operation. The testimony wasn't that was a large noxious use, but we are also saying there's not a commercial landscaping operation here, so we're going to have to work on that. But maybe we could say limited. I don't know, Mr. Prondak.
I think maybe like the mulch, limit the overall quantity of what can be stored.
And then lastly, I would propose that this permit expire, what did I say, September 30th?
That's what you said.
Why did I write January?
I don't know. You said, I crossed out January, wrote September after you said it.
Okay. I think, continue to have this expire on September 30th, 2018. You are authorized to renew it, so long as you renew it in a time sufficient for this board to extend it prior to its expiration. Those are, my notes indicate, are the issues that have been raised in this hearing. I have reduced most of this to writing, provided notes to my colleagues, and would invite you, Mr. Prondak, and for any comments. I don't know that it's appropriate right now to take additional testimony on it, but maybe hear from the applicant as to whether or not these are the types of conditions that you believe to be workable.
Let me comment, Mr. Chairman, about one thing that may not be workable. If you have fewer deliveries and smaller deliveries, that might be incompatible. In other words, fewer deliveries that were sizable, big deliveries you could have fewer of. Small deliveries and fewer, may not make sense. You may be working against yourself.
So these issues go together. I didn't suggest a limit on the number of deliveries, nor did I suggest a limit on the size of any one single delivery. But I think the combination of limiting the number of deliveries, limiting the size of the delivery, limiting the time that the deliveries can be made, and limiting the amount of mulch on the premises at any one time, sound to me and feel to me like the kinds of conditions that would respond, maybe not to everybody's satisfaction, but in the main would start to get to something that would be controllable by the town and strike a careful balance with a respected commercial operation. And I think importantly could be enforced by the building commissioner, which is, after all, why we're here today. To your point, Mr. Barry, perhaps this is the subject of the types of comments we may need to get from you during the comment period.
Sure.
And then I would invite members of the public to comment on this draft as well, and we will figure out the best way to provide that to the public. And then I recommend, because I know everybody's looking forward to having another hearing, recommend that we have yet another hearing on this. I don't think we can do it any other way and offer people an opportunity to really think this through thoughtfully, given the fact that we just don't have all these facts known. But I hope this has given you, and you, Mr. Barry, of course, and the neighbors, an indication of what at least we've thought we've heard, and trying to strike an appropriate balance. And I know there are some important details that are left off here, but we simply didn't have the facts and didn't want to make them up. So, does that sound like a reasonable way to proceed?
Yes, I wanted to just clarify something on mulch. I think the testimony was, Jason, 20, about an average, a seasonal average of about 20 tractor-trailer truck deliveries. Each tractor-trailer, 60 to 80 cubic yards.
Correct.
And that would be April, May, June mainly.
Yes.
So, for conceivably 5 deliveries per month, so 4, 5, 6, if we have 20 over expanded. I mean, is it mainly a situation where the majority of your big tractor trailers are coming in April, so it peters out in May and June, or is it
It's pretty
straight out?
consistent. It all depends on the weather, but it's, this year was pretty consistent. I'm not sure where that piece of paper is, but I think we did about 18 loads of mulch. And it was pretty safe to say
Those
that.
being tractor
Yeah,
trail trucks
deliveries.
backing in and pushing out the mulch.
Correct. 3 months, 6 loads, that's about right.
And so it's more or less a weekly time frame where a tractor trailer comes in. You know, at least once a week.
Once a week or every 10 days.
Yeah.
I think I wrote the dates on that. The deliveries.
How big are the trucks?
Lengthwise,
No, yards.
anywhere, depending on the time of the year, if it's a wet season, if it's a dry season, anywhere from 60 to 80 yards.
Okay. Anything else?
I just want to bring up, during the site visit, we spoke about 1146 using that property for excess storage. And we talked about the times that are currently in that permit weren't really working. And there was some discussion about maybe we could just, I think currently it's April to June 30th. It skips July maybe. Then it goes back into August through November maybe, and then back again for Christmas time. Just wondering if now would be the time that we could ask for the board to grant us to use that property for excess storage while we're open for the season.
What season?
Would be April through Christmas time.
This was one of my questions was about number 5, concerning the dates that are in this draft. And I wanted to make sure they were the right dates, or whether it was even particularly relevant to, for example, this says you can store stock between April 15th and June 30th, and then not again until September 15th until September 30th, and then November 15th to December 31st. So if a member of the town wanted to buy some plants in June or July or August, rather, there's no, according to this, there shouldn't be anything on the premises to buy. Is that correct?
Correct.
And not sure that these dates are particularly consistent with what your practice has been.
Correct.
Is that right? So I think we need to avoid having, putting
Sure.
Mr. Prodnak in a position of, having to go back and tell you to remove stuff in the middle of, at some date when you're not supposed to have it on there. What would be the right dates from your point of view? And maybe it would be one thing for the stock except for the Christmas trees.
Sure. Well, it would be, I would ask for April 1st to December 24th, which would include, the Christmas season.
But this is just for the 1146 property.
Yes, it is. But you'd also agree to the setbacks that you've suggested.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a setback on the house?
Well, I own the house, so I did not put a setback on it.
You don't live there.
I don't.
And the occupant of the house doesn't have anything to do with the operation, right,
She doesn't.
currently? Could there be a setback? It's a practical matter, there is a setback, right?
Yeah,
Put the drawing, put a setback on there?
15 feet.
I mean, here's the point. You've got a residential property at 1146 at which where you used to live.
Correct.
And there was a time when there was a swing set there, and it was a yard, and then it gradually grew when you stored stock, and the board said, it's too much stock. We gotta limit it. And they put the condition in. And then there was testimony, when you moved out, there was more stock put there. Now we're getting back to limiting it into a particular area. You've put the setback, but you haven't put a setback between where you're putting the stock and which portion of the property is being used for residential. That's all. So what we'd really like to do is separate the portion of 1146 being used for Eagle Farms and the portion of 1146 being used as a home.
No problem.
Okay.
Oh, my question is, well, one thing I'm noticing is that premises is defined
I
as...
got it.
You know where I'm going?
Yeah.
Both 1126 and 1146, and this limit would apply, yeah, okay, to both. But the same dates are going to apply to both?
No. The storage of the stock is only on 1146. Has to be limited that way.
Okay.
Because otherwise, he's got stock you've got stock on the main property
Correct.
all the time.
Okay.
It was only intended to be on 1146.
I don't recall what the logic of this bifurcated dates was in the past, but I agree with Mr. Gray, it may not make sense.
It had to do with the growth of the use of the property for storage. There's photographs showing when there was no stock there, and the board got into a limiting into the calendar. I think it's part of a negotiation, not unlike the one we're having now. The hearing at, let's see, hearing, the 2000, we talked about that in the 2000. That was fun. I wonder, is there any other, Mr. Prondak?
Just one comment suggestion while you're looking into some of the proposals on fencing, rather than just say, okay, let's put an 8-foot stockade fence in a particular spot. Maybe between now and the next hearing, we could look into a fence that has some sound attenuating qualities, because they are available, they do exist, and they're not, they're not outrageously expensive. The bottom line is they just use a lot less nails, because that's what helps.
So what are they made out of?
If you picture a lot of these fences that go up along the highways now, they have steel I-beams that have kind of built-in channels, and they simply drop the wood in between. The fact that there's no connection from the wood to the post makes it a sound deadening as opposed to a sound transferring barrier. So things like that, there's a number of ways it can be done.
Is it attractive, Joe, though?
Yeah, they've come a long way. So they are available. I just think it would, if we're going down that road, if we can kill two birds with one stone at the same time, it might be one thing to do.
Now, let me suggest this. I'd invite Mr. Prondak to work with the applicant, the owners of the premises, on revising the plan consistent with the testimony we've heard and your suggestion about noise, which I do think responds to the neighbors. I will, in cooperation with the board members, undertake to craft an amended and restated special permit and make that available publicly for public comment through Mrs. Fitzgerald. I would estimate that we would be in a position to do that not later than 1 week from today. The written amended permit will be available not less than 1 week from today. It's substantially developed. I'd then like to suggest that we reconvene. I'm going to keep this hearing open. Reconvene in yet another hearing to finalize the conditions And I will request, I don't want to take testimony from people in the audience now, because I don't think you've had an adequate opportunity to digest what you've heard tonight. And I'd like to come back and I'd like to reopen the testimony. We'll hear comments on the written report that, I don't want to debate the point, but I do want to hear comments on the conditions that we've suggested. And we'll move to finalize the hearing at that point. In the meantime, between now and perhaps Monday, it might not be bad if you could communicate to Mrs. Fitzgerald information that would be helpful for us on total capacity of yards of mulch at the premises at any one time, and a little bit more about capacity during seasonal capacity, let's say that. We know April, May, and June are your high seasons. We know that you have a limited period of amount of mulch, or perhaps no mulch, when it's snowing. Or maybe that's not right. Maybe there's some mulch, but not a lot of mulch. And then there's another period of time when there's some mulch, but not a lot of mulch. My sense from listening to this is that when there's not a lot of mulch at your property, the neighbors' concerns are not as great. And if we can begin to limit the calendar within which you're operating, in the high season, if you will, I think we'll make more progress. So, but I don't want to make that up. And it would be helpful if you could get us information on that, and then we could, for the benefit of everybody, we could have them consider that as well. And I'm looking at you, Mr. Prondak, as to whether or not that might be a reasonable way to proceed. Okay. So I'd like to ask Mrs. Fitzgerald, could you provide us with a date as to when we might be able to reconvene? Today is September 10th.
What's your availability? I've got the calendar here, so I don't pick up a date.
You have some October hearings already, right?
Yeah.
You guys can do a different night, schedule, take advantage of that.
Corcoran comes just so that he can figure out when we're meeting.
Get another one in.
Wait a minute.
October 22nd?
No, September? No, October 15th and 22nd.
There's a hearing on the 22nd?
Yes, we have the 15th and the 22nd. Yeah.
Is it full?
3 hearings on each.
Oh.
I've got 3 for the 22nd and 3 for the 15th. And more to come for it.
I'm going to be away on the 15th, and wouldn't be able to make that date.
23rd?
Thursdays are going to be bad for me going forward because of choir practice.
21st?
21st, this should be all right. 21st and 20th. No, I'm off. Yeah, 21st.
28th? 29th?
21st doesn't work?
21st is all right.
21st for you?
Yeah.
21st for you?
What day of the week is that?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Okay, so with that, those caveats, with the homework I've asked Mr. Sanatellis to do and cooperate with the building and commissioner, I'd like to suspend this hearing.
Quick
Mr.
question,
Barrett.
Mr. Chairman. Is it fair to presume that testimony from the public would be reactive and not an opportunity to bring up new things at that point?
Well, what I've asked for is for the members of the public to comment on the conditions that have been imposed.
No problem with that.
I'd like to recommend that we suspend this hearing to be reconvened at 7:30 PM on Tuesday.
Here or the blue? Here.
Doesn't matter. Reconvene on Tuesday, October 21st at 7:30 PM. Thank you very much.
I'll do it right here.
Thanks. Well, thank you.
You're gonna set this, the week after I give you the information for Jake.
Yeah, well, we got some work to do. These guys have comments.
Right.
Be great. Well, you're going to edit it, right? Can you PDF that to us?
Sorry?
Can you PDF that? That's the best, I think. Then we can print
And
it.
then you can do it with the changes, right?
Mary, could you just keep that in the file, so...
Yeah.
Members of the public, if you want to see the official file, it will be at Town Hall, at the office of the Board of Appeals.
Yeah.
And then if anybody wants to review that,
It'll come to me.
just the top one. I'll give them back this, because that's for this one.
Am I the chairman of this? Okay, we're going to, we're going to call for order the 8 o'clock hearing of the Milton Board of Appeals. My name is Jeffrey Mullen. I'll be acting as chairman tonight. To my immediate right is Stephen Lumbo, a member of the Board of Appeals, and to my immediate left is Nicholas Gray. We've convened tonight upon the application of Robert and Susan Peterson, dated July 31st, 2014, on file with the board for a special permit and/or variance from the terms of Section 6A3 of Chapter 10 of the General Bylaws of the Town of Milton, so as to create a new buildable lot next to the existing single-family lot at 12, single-family residence at 12 Bailey Avenue. The applicants are the owners of two lots, Lot 15 and 28, according to a 1900 subdivision plan, having acquired both lots in 1989. The applicant's residence is sited on Lot 15, which contains 4,979 square feet of land with approximately 50 feet of frontage on Bailey Avenue and 100 feet of frontage on Conway Road. The applicants request zoning relief to build a new single-family residence on the adjacent Lot 28 on Conway Road. This lot contains 6,000 square feet of land and has 60 feet of frontage along Conway Road. The property lies in a Residence C zoning district. The Milton zoning bylaw, Section 6A3, requires that a lot for construction of a new and separate single-family home contain at least 7,500 square feet of land and have 75 feet of frontage along a way. This proposal would violate Section 6A3 of the bylaw, as Lot 28 would not contain the required square footage, nor would it have the right amount of frontage. Also, Lot 15 would be left with less than the required amount of square footage. All is set forth in the application and plans on file with the board and open to public inspection. I have in my file in front of me the application filed by Edward Corcoran, attorney in Quincy, on behalf of Susan and Robert Peterson, the applicants. That consists of several pages, some written testimony, some plans of the premises, all of which, and a previous decision of the Town of Milton Board of Appeals, a list of the abutters that have been notified of the hearing, and a copy of the advertisement that appeared in the paper of record, the Milton Times, and a copy of Mr. Corcoran's application. That's the entirety of the application. I see Mr. Corcoran and his clients, I presume. Welcome to the Board of Appeals, Mr. Corcoran. Perhaps you could introduce the topic and introduce who's in front of us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Edward Corcoran. I am an attorney, and I have an office in Quincy. I live here in Milton, and I appear periodically before the board on behalf of clients. I am joined by Robert Peterson and his son, Michael. They're joined by their wives, Susan and Jillian, who are here sitting in the audience. The current owners of both lots are Robert and Susan Peterson. Michael and his wife Jillian and their two young children live with Michael's parents in the premises at 12 Bailey Avenue. Michael is a decorated member of the United States Army, is a Purple Heart recipient and Medal of Valor recipient, and is an active member of the United States Army, and is scheduled to periodically redeploy overseas. And the goal here is to build a home on property next door so that they are physically separated from Michael's parents, but are close enough to Michael's parents, so that while Michael is away overseas, that his wife and two young children have the capacity to live next door. And so the plan is to take a lot which, under some sections of the code, would be authorized to be granted a special permit, allow a special permit to be granted on the lot that is on Conway Road. It would cause the existing dwelling on Bailey Avenue to become revert to its pre-existing non-conforming status. This is an interesting matter involving one of the older subdivisions in Milton, but a subdivision in Milton that is essentially very common with respect to the way that the residency zones of Milton were developed over time. This 1900 plan was created and recorded in 1900, has 231 lots. Most of the lots are in the average size of 5,000 to 6,000 square feet. There are a few that exceed that. There are substantial numbers that are 5,000 square feet, and many of them have been built. There are homes that are pre-existing, non-conforming on many of those lots. I've brought some additional material, including one set to pass out. I have done a title summary for both the 12 Bailey Avenue and the vacant lot on Conway. I've done a permit and variance summary for the neighborhood that is immediately around the properties. And I've laid out some of that on two plans. I've got one copy of each set for each member of the board. And pass that for review. No, I need one. So the first issue is, it really goes to a legal issue on whether the lots in question have legally merged. And there is a case involved, a case in Massachusetts interpreting the Milton bylaw, which is Lindsay versus the Board of Appeals of Milton. It was back in 1972. And it basically described the conditions under which two lots which are owned in common will have merged by a matter of deed. And the key provision goes to how those lots, whether lots created prior to zoning in 1938, whether those lots have been considered either by plan or by deed at a later time to have merged by description. And in the case in point with Lindsay, the court had found that the deed, a later deed, described two lots on a plan as a single parcel. It changed the description of the lots in question to a single parcel. The title summary that I've done, and I've provided in my original materials a copy of the deed to the Petersons, is clear that the two properties are different title. They're differently described. The parcel with the dwelling is on registered land. The parcel in question is unregistered land. Those descriptions have maintained themselves uniformly. And of significant note, under subsection C, paragraph C of subsection 3, section 6 of the bylaw, it talks about a dwelling that may be erected on a lot containing less than 7,500 square feet or having frontage of less than 75 feet. If such lot was recorded on February 10, 1938, did not at the time of the adoption of that bylaw adjoin other land of the same owner available for use in connection with that lot. In 1938,
Why are you here?
because we have requested and been denied a building permit.
Gotcha.
And we think we're entitled to a special permit, but the board may determine that it requires a variance. But we think we're entitled to a special permit under this provision. And that in 1938, 12 Bailey Avenue, which is the registered land with the dwelling, was owned by Henry and Alice Shadbourne. Henry deceased in 1940, later conveyed the property to Henry and Kathleen Culligan as tenants by the entirety. At the same time, the unimproved lot on Conway Road was owned by Bagdasar Havanosian, or Havanation, however you pronounce that. And he owned it, his family owned it until in 1950, 9 years after the Colligans acquired title to 12 Bailey. His heirs sold it to Henry Culligan individually in 1950. And we understand that Mr. Culligan had an oil business and built a garage on that premises and used it to store trucks and other equipment associated with his business. It was not used in conjunction with the dwelling. It's now used to park. There's a basketball court. It is used, but it has maintained its separate identity through the recorded history associated with the property. So I think with respect to that title history, the lot complies with the sub-C provision, paragraph 3, where the board is entitled to may grant special permits for construction of dwellings on lots that are less than 7,500 square feet, and have less frontage. And if you look at subparagraph B, that talks about taking an existing lot that may have less than 15,000 square feet and carving it into two separate lots, each with a minimum of 6,000 square feet and a frontage of 60 feet. That's not the case here because we don't have a single lot of more than 12,000 square feet. But it is a lot size that has been recognized in subsection 3 under both subparagraphs A and B as a lot size pursuant to which the board may grant the permit, and it is consistent with the size of the lot for which the application is made today. The Conway Road lot is a lot of 6,000 square feet with 60 feet of frontage. The next thing I did was I sort of did an evaluation of how the area on Bailey Avenue, Galen Street, and Conway Road, which are two streets that parallel each other, perpendicular to Bailey, were developed. And on the plan, the overview plan that I've taken from the town's website, I've colored in yellow those lots which were built upon after 1938. And I think that's important because it talks of 1938 is January 1938 is the year and the time when our zoning bylaws were drafted and approved. And you can see that, and what I've done is I've circled the address of each in red. And I have put the date of construction of each on the plan. So if we start on Pleasant Street, 131 Pleasant, which is just one in up the Pleasant from the corner of Bailey and Pleasant. That was a lot that's, and then the next plan to be helpful is the town's assessors, from the town's assessors lot, which shows lot size and frontage for in town records. So 131 Pleasant contained 5,187 square feet. That was built in 1964. There's no record of a variance or special permit having been issued. If you come around the corner to 2 Bailey Avenue, that was built in 1947. That is a 5,000 square foot lot with 50 feet of frontage. The next two...
So I'm sorry, are you suggesting that the reason they don't have a special permit is because of the interpretation of 3C?
I think it's well, yes, and I think there was a practice in town
Yeah.
To grant...
Because the lot existed prior to February 10,
Exactly.
1938, on a
Exactly.
recorded plan. Okay.
And so 2 Bailey Avenue, 7 Bailey
Yep.
Avenue, 13, 15, 10, were all built the same way.
Okay.
Got it.
I've hatched in 4 Bailey Avenue and 7 Galen, because that is the subject of they are identically situated to the 2 lots here. And that was the subject of a variance that was granted by the Board of Appeals in 1990 to the Colligan family, to allow a dwelling to be constructed in 1990 at 7 Galen. The conditions are almost identical. The lots that corner on Bailey, 4 Bailey and 12 Bailey, are each identical size. They are 4,900 and 79 square feet. They're less than 5,000 in each case because of a rounded corner. And the attached lots, 7 Galen and the Conway Road lot, are each 6,000 square feet, 60 feet of frontage. I attached the variance decision that I attached to the original is incorporated here. And they simply said, it was a very brief, you can read it, very brief decision, simply said that owing to conditions especially affecting this parcel of land, but not affecting generally the zoning district, little enforcement condition of bylaws involving substantial hardship to the applicants would be difficult, no detriment to the public good, and that no nearby real estate would be affected. And there's nothing about the lot otherwise that would create hardship under the legal argument, but I think that's a recognition at the board at the time that this was an application that was consistent with everything else that had been happening. What is interesting is when you get to Galen Road, if you look at the 1900 site plan, those lots were reconfigured in the 1940s and 50s. You used to have, it was lots, you'd say lots 13, 14, which front on Bailey, lot 29, which would be right across from the lot in question, and then lots 36 and 37, which corner on, in front on Lyman Road on the other side, that's 5 lots that were reconfigured into 4. Now, those lots were reconfigured into lots that were for 18, one became 18 Bailey on the corner, 6,474 square feet with frontage of 90 on Bailey. The next 2 in the middle, each with 6,500 square feet and 65 feet of frontage, and the one on the far corner, 6,479 square feet with adequate frontage. They are still substandard in accordance with residency zoning. There is no record of variance or special permit having been granted by the board in the 1940s, but they were increased in size, but still substandard with respect to the residency zone, and those were constructed in 1958, 1947, 1952, and 1951, as I've shown on the
Okay.
plan. So,
Then what happened? Cedar became Galen?
yeah, Cedar and Cedar became Galen and Pine became Conway.
Okay.
For reasons I'm not
Doesn't matter.
familiar with, but yeah. And so, what we're suggesting then is, consistent with the history of the development of this neighborhood, we think that this is something that the board would be in a position to establish. Now, I asked, because there's always questions of value, we secured an appraisal from John McGovern, and I have copies of an appraisal that he's prepared. He unfortunately was unable to be here this evening, but he's prepared an appraisal that, in his opinion, with 23 years of experience in Milton, having appraised property in Milton, both within, for private purposes and for the town. Most recently, he indicates in his letter that the appraised property nearby on Pleasant that was being acquired for purposes, by the town for purposes of expanding the cemetery lot, that he is recognized and has extensive experience in Milton, and in his opinion, that an additional dwelling at this location will have a positive impact on values within the neighborhood, particularly with respect to the immediately abutting properties on 31 Lyman Street and 10 Galen Street, which is, 10 Galen is the one that backs up to the other side. Interesting, that is a house that was built in 1897, and a year ago, a variance was granted to put a roof dormer in, and a variance was granted because it's essentially a 4-story dwelling. It's got a first floor elevation that exceeds 4 feet, so the unfinished basement counts as a story, and the addition of the dormer on the 3rd floor attic resulted in the attic space becoming full story, and a variance was granted for that. There are other variances that were granted for additions to some of the houses in the neighborhood, for either for side yard setbacks, for minor additions that affected rear yard or side yard setbacks. But I think it's important that Mr. McGovern's opinion as value that this would be new investment will serve to enhance the value of properties within the neighborhood, including those that immediately abut the lot. And he was specifically asked to evaluate the impact on those directly abutting properties. We also have, in addition to the plans themselves, Mr. Peterson has secured a proposal that he's prepared to adopt, and happy to have it included as a condition of construction, that to address issues of along abutting properties, that he would install arborvitaes at 8 to 10 feet tall, 14 along the sideline of the property at 31 Lyman Road, and 2 that were specifically requested by the owners of 10 Galen, and that he would, it's not a very significant plan. They took a photograph of the common boundary looking from 31 Lyman towards the lot in question, and then he would basically infill that with arborvitaes. And the quote to do that, as I indicated, is $8,423, not an insignificant cost. It is interesting that at one point, about a year ago, I do have some other photographs of the area that I'll show particular properties, but along that common property line, as of August of last year, there was a line of tall evergreens that were then taken down by the abutter. Presumably those would have acted as, for purposes of screening. Mr. the Petersons are prepared to replace those with a privacy screen of arborvitae's. And the last thing I have for the board before I turn it over to the board, obviously for questions, is a series of letters of support from many of the abutters. There's a single letter that was signed by a number of the abutters, and then several of them, the direct abutter behind 10 Galen.
These over there so that people can see them.
I think he's.
I've got copies of them. The Eisters at 10 Galen, the Zimone at 8 Conway, which is directly across the street, and the Monizes, who are next door neighbors at 10 Bailey, specifically wrote to recommend approval by the board. And so with that, I would open it to your questions and obviously questions from the audience.
So before we start, I don't see the copy of the letter from the building inspector in the file. Do you have it?
Yeah,
I'm interested in that. Well, it's not in the file I have.
It's not in the application?
Not in here.
I got it somewhere. I can find it now.
So let me just make sure I understand. You've asked for, there's 3 things, okay. Okay, so I did not read this letter. I will tell everybody that there is a letter in the file denying the proposal to build a single-family home on the premises. The building inspector indicates that the Milton bylaw, section 683, about which Mr. Corcoran has been speaking, requires that a lot for construction of a new and separate single-family home contain 7,500 square feet of land and have 75 feet of frontage. And Mr. Prondak denies that. So that's in the record, and I should have indicated that it is. I apologize for that. You have asked the board for, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 things. The first is a determination that the lots created in the March 1900 subdivision owned by the applicants are separate lots. Are you saying that under 6A3, 6A3?
Yep.
6A3, if they are separate lots, they then need a special permit? Or can they be built separately, and therefore the board's determination that they are separate lots simply makes them a buildable lot? Is that? I know that the paragraph is torturous to read. We've read it many times over the years. It's hard to read, but I do think that, I don't think that C references a special permit, and I'm wondering if there's really 3 questions here. One is a determination of whether they're separate lots. Number 2, if they aren't separate lots, a special permit. And number 3, if the board can't see that there's a special permit, you're asking for zoning relief in the form of a variance.
That's
Okay.
exactly
All
right.
right, fair enough.
In that order.
I have some questions, but I think it would be, I'd like to maybe hear from board members, and then maybe, why don't I just hear from board members, and then we'll decide how to proceed.
Prefer to Nick at this point. My mind is a little twisted with,
Don't have much to say except it seems to me so far from what you've said and from looking at the deeds that these really are separate lots. They have separate meets and bounds. One is registered land, which means that the land court has declared it to be a separate lot, period. And the fact that they show up within the same deed, they're even, I mean, if this is the operative one, I don't remember, I haven't traced through the title history yet, but I mean, it's clear from me, to my point of view, that these have been maintained as separate lots. I think the case that you cited would have been applicable if these 2 descriptions had been merged, right? That's the way I read it.
That's the way I read that case.
And, but obviously they haven't, at least from what you've provided us, they have not been merged in their descriptions. And the fact that I would argue that, as I understand it, because this parcel 1 on this would be the one where the house exists now, is registered land, you could not merge them without getting a new certificate of title from the land court by incorporating both, I think. So that's the only observation I have at this point, but I'll go on.
So let me ask you, I have one question I'd like to open it up to the audience. I think we have some questions about what would be built, but I'd like to hear from the audience about some of the concerns. What is the unregistered parcel on Conway Road used for now? You said it was a basketball hoop. We saw that in the photos.
It is used really as sort of backyard and parking.
There's a garage on it, though.
There is a garage.
Is the garage used for parking?
The garage is used for storage of materials.
Is the use of the premises of the Conway Road lot, which is, has been identified here as 0 Conway Road, is it in connection with 12 Bailey Lane?
Well, it's owned, it's owned.
But they're not independent activities, right? Was ever living in the house playing basketball in the driveway? Okay. It's not, no, you're not saying that it's separate, like it was with the oil company?
Correct.
Okay, all right, fine. It's their driveway and their garage and their basketball hoop.
Mm-hmm.
All of which, if they built the house, you would no longer have.
Correct.
Okay.
And the plan would be to remove the existing garage,
So you can build a house?
build out.
Okay.
You may have stated this, but if Lindsay tells us that the lots did not merge by deed, we can proceed by special permit? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know that.
I think you could make it,
don't
well,
know.
I think you could make a determination that the lots are separate, and the building commission could grant the building permit.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to read Lindsay, I think.
Yeah. I'm not, yeah.
At least to,
Lindsay doesn't speak to what the power of the board would be, it just simply speaks to whether or not the
Yes,
lots are.
yeah.
It seems like the board in 1990 didn't reach that conclusion and jumped to the variance.
on
Yeah,
the...
Robert
adjacent
Connors,
lot,
yeah. Let me ask the members of the audience if anybody's here to speak in support of the request for determination, request for special permit, or request for a variance, all of which I think is a long way of saying the same thing. They support the idea of using the premises to build a second dwelling unit. Anybody in the audience want to speak in support of that? Let me ask if there's anybody here to speak in opposition to the proposal to build a second dwelling unit on the Conway Road lot.
Yes.
Yes. Approach the board and introduce yourself, and we'd be happy to hear from you. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
My name is Peter J. Mulholland. For the purpose of adding background to my remarks, I want to say that I have held a construction supervisor's license, a real estate broker's license, and have been a notary public for more than 40 years. During that time, I participated in many types of building projects, including one that is relevant to this hearing. I subdivided the lot and built a residence at 4 Galen Street. It recently was sold for a very impressive amount. There were no zoning issues. My daughter Rachel Mulhern and I own the property at 31 Lyman Road, which directly abuts the property that the applicants, Robert and Susan Peterson, for which they have applied for a special permit and/or variance at 4 Bailey Avenue. We object to the issuance of the required special permit and/or variance for several specific reasons. The applicants at this hearing are asking the board to breach the existing zoning laws on 3 separate instances by creating 2 non-conforming lots and also agreeing that one of the 2 lots will not have the required amount of frontage. These requests, I feel, are egregious and unfathomable. It's as if we had no zoning laws. and anyone who wants to can obtain relief at any level and build whatever they please. This is not what Milton is, in my opinion. I've spoken to several of the most successful real estate brokers in town, and they all agree that the building of a new single-family residence on the proposed lot, which does not contain the required square footage or frontage that the current zoning laws require, would seriously diminish the value of our property as well as other property in the neighborhood. The increased density that this proposed residence will create will affect the privacy that currently exists in the neighborhood. We at 31 Lyman are downgrading to the applicant's property, and the proposed new residence will literally look down into our property. My daughter is single and lives in her home by herself. Security and privacy are very important issues to her. We recently took down a series of evergreen trees that were close to our common boundary because the backyard was heavily shaded, there was substantial mildew on the house, and almost continuous dampness all across the back of the property. The foundation is a rubble foundation and is thus very porous. Certain times during the year, we get seepage into the cellar already. If a new residence is constructed on what is currently perkable, absorbable land, groundwater issues will be exacerbated. Only if it were possible to directly expel the groundwater into the town's catch basin system could we alleviate this problem. But that would be illegal. Even if dry wells were created, our down gradient location will get increased infiltration directly down gradient from the dry wells. In summary, the virtual obliteration of the zoning laws, significant decreased valuation throughout the neighborhood because of increased density, privacy issues, and the effect on groundwater flow are issues that should cause this application to be denied. The zoning bylaws need to be upheld with regard to this application. Thank you, members of the board, for your attention and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mulhern. May I ask if anybody else in the audience is here to speak in opposition to the application? Yes, sir. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you. My name is Thomas Doherty. I'm an attorney. I live on Adams Street. I've been asked to help the Mulherns, and I'll be brief because I came this afternoon and looked at the record here, and it's helpful, but I wasn't able to, from the submissions, understand the analytical basis for the request for a special permit and how that tied into the request for a variance. So it's helpful to hear the discussion tonight, but I would like to take the opportunity with this, the benefit of this colloquy, to look at that Lindsay case in the context that it's been presented here, because as I understand it, there's a reference to a practice of no special permit required or no variance given in certain circumstances, which I'm not sure is really supported in this record. And secondly, there's a reference to a 1990 decision. But in that 1990 decision, there was, as it says right in the decision, there was no objection stated, there was no objection made. And there's a kind of generalized and almost quoted from the applicable regulation paragraph that doesn't really give specific reason why that variance was granted. So I don't know that that the board has, an adequate record on how Lindsay applies or doesn't apply. Whether that practice of no special permit in the record, no variance appearing in the record really is one that is a reliable basis upon which to reach any conclusion. And whether that 1990 decision has any bearing at all where, in and of itself, there was no objection to the matter. So, if possible, we could take a look at those legal points and maybe address that further.
So are you requesting that the hearing be suspended to a later date?
No, I'm saying I don't think there's a basis on this submission to really articulate for the board how that legal analysis fits together. And when I went to the record today to see whether or not there'd be a memorandum or some type of laying out for this hearing, I think the burden's on the applicant to make that record, and I didn't see it. And I don't think a precedent where there was no objection is relevant. I don't think a reference to a practice where there's an inference that there may have been no variance granted or no special permit granted tells you anything about the circumstances underneath the commercial dealings there. And I don't think the Lindsay case is applicable.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. It was Doherty, right? Mr. Doherty?
Thomas Doherty, yes.
From Adams Street.
247.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else speak in objection to the variance? Does anybody want to speak in support of the variance?
We have questions.
Sure. Anybody have, all right, does anybody have any questions about the application?
Yeah.
Come on up. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Hi, I'm John Morgan. I live across the street from the Petersons.
What does that mean? What street are you on?
I'm on Bailey, 13 Bailey Avenue.
Okay.
And the plan I saw for the construction of the new home did not include a driveway. Now, my understanding is that we're all required to park our vehicles on our own property and not in front of the houses overnight in the town of Milton. That is correct, is it not?
Yeah.
Would that not mean that the plot plan should require a driveway?
Well, we haven't gotten into the portion of the hearing where we'll talk about I think it's a fair point. We'll get into that detail with the applicant.
Okay, we've discussed it, and they've come up with a plan that, it would suffice. If it came down, that was the last issue of Bill, I would have I would agree,
Your question surrounds the adequacy of parking and how that would work with respect to the use of the two lots.
Right, because right now, they currently have 4 or 5 acres between the two homes, for both homes. Okay.
There's only one home.
Well, currently there's one home, but between the proposed 2 homes.
Between the two families.
Huh?
Between the two families.
Yeah, between the 2 houses,
Yeah,
they would
okay.
have a shared driveway, I guess.
Okay.
That would seem to work out, that's okay.
And just to respond to that one question, the plan is to incorporate a driveway at its current location, and for the driveway to be adequately sized from a length perspective to handle parking for both lots. Well, be adequate of width and length. We haven't drawn on the plot plan. We did not have drawn in a scale version. That's something that we're happy to draw it in and to do it in a way that's satisfactory to neighbors who are concerned about location and scale of
All right,
driveway.
I think we got a little bit ahead of ourselves on that. Okay, so that's your question.
Well, that's
You have another question?
Yes, I do, yeah.
What's your other question?
We have a 5,000 square foot lot, okay? And part of your argument, sir, is that there's not a 5,000 square foot lot, technically.
There are.
Okay. the proposed plan would reduce Bob's lot to close to 5,000 square feet,
His lot is 4,979 square feet.
pretty close.
And I think the curve in the lot is what affects that.
And Mike's lot would be 6,000 square feet, which is larger than mine, but not in compliance with the zoning.
Well, I don't, I mean, that's, you're reaching a legal conclusion.
I'm not
and
sure.
Yeah, no one's saying that. No, that may be your view, but that may not be the case of how the bylaw is to be read. There's testimony here about the need to respect the bylaw. Nobody respects the zoning bylaw more than the zoning board of appeals. And I don't want to agree that the lots are not currently in compliance with the bylaw, because there's a provision in the bylaw that permits so-called undersized lots that are lower than 7,500 square feet and lack the required frontage if they were in existence prior to 1938.
Right.
And the testimony here, and have maintained an indicia of separate ownership since. So this case is really all about that, and whether or not they look and feel to the average person perhaps as one lot, and it gets a little bit complicated because the basketball hoop is on one lot that supports the other lot. The question is whether or not they are in fact under the law separate lots, and therefore under the zoning bylaw separate lots, and therefore both buildable. So that this is not the case where somebody's being, and a very different, we've had this case many times, where somebody comes in and has one lot, in this case it would be 11,000 square feet, asking to subdivide the lot to create two lots. One lot that would then be undersized, or both lots would be undersized, and you can't do that. You can't create an undersized lot and then leave your own lot undersized as well, creating a non-conformity. Those aren't the facts. The facts are that, and the testimony has been around whether or not they are indeed two separate lots. So I didn't mean to go off on a tangent, but I did, and it was only because you were reaching a legal conclusion that we aren't there yet.
Is there any line in the sand where the zoning appeal could not be crossed?
Well, but we...
4,000 square feet?
No, well, let me just say this. I can't recall, I see it happened in 1990. It's very rare that the board would grant a variance for an undersized lot in this town. Very rare. Very rare. And I'm sure it's happened, but where it happens, the board certainly tries to comply with the strict requirements of Chapter 40A owing to topography, particular circumstances around the particular lot. We haven't heard any of that here. What we've heard is that there's a lot of lots in this neighborhood stemming from the fact that the neighborhood is old and was created around the turn of the last century. Makes sense. And that, in fact, the second lot is larger than many of the lots that have been built on, as you just said.
It is.
So, a short answer to your very good question is it's rare.
Okay.
And the standard is very high.
Final question. From my own personal point of view, they're wonderful neighbors. Not they really are. And being very personal, my 5,000 square foot lot, I'll be able to sell that, right? Because my kids are grown. Thank you for
So am I.
Thank you for your time.
I know what you want from me.
Yes. Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you. My name is Charlene Mulhern. I'm Rachel's mother and Judy's wife. And I was born and brought up on 31 Lyman Road. And Henry
Welcome to the Board of Appeals.
Thank you. Henry Colligan, who was the oil man,
Yes.
lived there on Peterson's property, and that property was always one lot of land. He ran his oil business out of his home, and he kept his trucks in the garage.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Corcoran, do you have? I have some questions about what's going to be built there. Maybe ask you what would be proposed to be built there.
Yeah, we provided plans prepared by an architect as part of the application. that 2 sheets, it would be a building that, 2 sheets prepared by an architect, Exhibit 5 to the application, prepared by Brian Saludi, an architect, that show renderings from 4 sides on sheet A2 and 2 floor plans for first and second floor. The building proposed itself complies in all respects with zoning, with respect to setbacks, with respect to height, and whatnot. It is simply a dwelling that is scaled to meet the current zoning. It would be set back further than many of the other dwellings in the neighborhood, because it will honor the front yard setback requirement. Many of the other buildings, dwellings are closer than 20 feet off of the front yard setback. So this is what's proposed to be built. It's about a $315,000 house.
So your testimony is that were the dwelling be deemed to be a buildable lot and otherwise permitted to be built on, it would comply with the zoning, would otherwise comply with the zoning? What do you say about the parking? What's the plan for parking accommodation?
The parking accommodation is to be a parking area that it will be along the sort of the front and the left side of the lot closest to the 12 Bailey Avenue. There will be parking area in front of the dwelling and along the left side of the dwelling.
So, what do you, I don't know what you're saying. Is the parking going to be completely enclosed?
And it will be completely taken care of on, it'll be off-street parking. There will be no on-street parking associated with either. We understand that during the period of time that the properties are owned by related families, that they will cooperate together to provide parking for the two. In the future, if 12 Bailey Avenue is sold, if Conway Avenue is sold, either because the Peterson Senior move out, then parking would have to be accounted for on the 12 Bailey Avenue property. But the current plan is to provide parking on the Conway Road property.
So the 12 Bailey Avenue parking would be on Conway Road? Would be on the Conway Road property?
It's where they park now.
Right.
The alternative is to cut a driveway in the area on the rear of the house between there and the property line, and to allow parking there. And that's an option I think is available if required.
So potentially separate parking for each lot?
Yeah. There's room to create parking, separate parking for each lot. The current plan is to provide the parking simply
on Conway.
We have a question from the audience. Yes.
I'm sorry, I live at 14 Conway.
Okay, so why don't you come up and tell us who you are, and we can welcome you to the Board of Appeals.
No, I just have a question about the driveway.
That's fine, but we want to hear.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Hi, I'm Julie Green, I live at 14 Conway. Road.
Julie Green,
Right across.
14 Conway.
Mhm.
Okay. Hang on a second.
And I have a question again about the driveway.
So 14 Conway is...
Right across the street.
Yeah. There.
Okay.
Sorry, there.
Across you from both properties?
Right.
Yeah, okay. So
Literally.
where are you back? You waited a long time to step up here.
So
Julie Green.
Yeah.
Okay.
So my question is where the driveways are going to be. Conway Road is a very small, narrow street.
Yeah.
Right now, there are 2 driveways, and there isn't a lot of, there's not a lot of parking anyway, but it's very narrow. So my question...
Well, in fact, there's no parking on the
There
street.
is no parking. Even during the day, it's not a good day to park on the street.
But at night, there's no parking.
I know that.
Okay.
I've been for a long time. But I'm just saying that I have been told a couple of different things where the driveways are going to be, and I need clarification
Yeah.
about that. That would make me feel
Yeah.
comfortable about the whole.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's an excellent point, and that is your point. Do you have another question?
No,
Okay.
that's not.
I do think there's a principle here that every tub needs to sit on its own bottom, and it seems inconsistent to have the lots be separate and yet have one lot be relying on the other for parking. And I'm a little nervous about permitting that as well, and I think maybe some more work needs to be done on the parking. Steve?
No, that was my question.
Okay. Nick?
Nothing further on that.
Okay.
We're happy to address the issues of parking and to arrive at appropriate locations for parking with the neighbors if otherwise the matter is.
So you're proposing that we suspend and reconvene? Is that what you want to do?
My preference would be to not bring everybody back out. My preference would be to work out a location, but I'm happy to do it in the next 2 minutes if that's capable. I know you've been here for a long time.
I got nothing but time for you. Time to know. And I know I remember Steve too.
So we can propose separate parking access for each. I know that there may be a concern about there being more than one parking access, so if there's parking that comes in with an easement across. Ms. Green, could you come up?
Huh? You want to wait?
Nowhere to go.
We're only missing the president.
I know that during the day, in the last
9
couple
o'clock,
of
I
days,
think.
there's been some questions about
Yeah.
location and where the parking is going to be provided. So what I'd really like to know is where specifically you as the butter across the street would like to be and how it would.
Well, my concern is putting 2 driveways in a small amount of land is what my concern is.
If there were a driveway that came in off of Conway here and turned into the driveway.
Right across the street there's a driveway here and a driveway here for the existing home.
Would it be there? So that they would come in and turn in here?
You're saying a common area to
Common-
go?
It could be a common driveway with an easement for access granted back to this property owner so that legally, this property would have the right to have parking. And you would come in from a common driveway.
So that's the driveway that exists now.
Correct.
And then you'd go to the left, and the other one would go straight. If I can see that that's something you guarantee, then I'd be willing to, you know, but I choose different separate ones with a small amount of area.
That is,
So what is the proposal?
proposal would have, there's
You need to
an,
explain it in a way that everybody in the room can hear it, if you don't mind.
there is an existing driveway that comes in essentially along the edge of the Conway Road property, where the parking area in here comes back to the garage. Proposal would be to retain that driveway open and to have an easement granted from this property back to this property to allow driveway access to come in and enter the Conway Road lot, the Bailey Avenue lot, and that driveway access for this property. So there'll be separate driveways on each lot, but a single point of entry. And
The cross easement.
for the cross easement.
Will each property be burdened by the other, or are you proposing that one, will the easement be to the benefit of one and not the other? In other words, would 0 Conway be able to park on 12 Bailey and 12 Bailey on 0 Conway?
I would simply say, I think as a matter of practice, they would do that, but I think as a matter of legal drafting, you would want to have 0 Conway burdened and 12 benefited, so that if there's a separation, different families, then they're not dealing with the cross benefit, they just know that there's a right to enter.
12 Bailey would enjoy the benefit of being able to park on 0 Conway.
That's right.
In a recorded easement.
And a recorded easement, and happy to make it a condition of a permit as well.
In fact, this property would be conveyed.
Yes,
Is that
it will
right?
be conveyed.
Yeah.
if the...
Okay. So is that the conclusion of the testimony?
Yes.
And people have had an opportunity to speak and be heard. So let me ask the board members, if you have any further questions, or if you wish to deliberate this, if you'd like additional information.
Well, we've heard some concerns from Mr. Mulhern and the attorney, and I don't know whether or not it would be worth an attempt to perhaps discuss a couple of those. I think the one that jumped out at me was the issue of water filtration and so forth. It is a live issue. There's some fairly strongly stated opposition. And generally speaking, in terms of granting these variances, when we have, knowing the statute that we're dealing with, when we have a stated opposition, we sort of have limited remedy and abilities as board members. So.
Are we sure a variance is necessary under the bylaw? That's what I'm not, I've been staring at it for.
Right.
I'm looking at paragraph 3 of section 6. I'm not backing up far enough. It's 6A3, and then the paragraph 3 looks like it states the general rule, which says defining what residency district size lots should be, and that restriction applies to lots established before, on February 10th, 1938, except that, and then there are 3 exceptions. And it seems to me that the exception that could be relevant in this situation is subsection C. One dwelling may be erected on a lot containing less than 7,500 square feet or having a frontage of less than 75 feet if such lot was recorded on February 10th, 1938, and did not at the time of such adoption adjoin other land of the same owner available for use in connection with said lot. The testimony has been that in 1938, those 2 lots had separate owners. So if they are separate lots, they were separate lots in 1938, they were owned by different people at that time, if the separate lot whether the use of them as separately or not was maintained, I'm not sure whether that's relevant, but if the legal description was kept separate since that time, which this record seems to imply, then it's sounding to me that based on that information, that it might be fitting within this exception.
Yeah, so here's what I think that means. And I appreciate the comment about the importance of Colligan to the story, but Colligan entered the picture too late to not enjoy the benefit of the exception in the zoning bylaw, it seems to me. The way the bylaw, I think, works in this case is that the lots, to your point, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. No, I got you, Julie, but you know, yeah, John. The lot is ordinarily undersized. The bylaw requires 7,500 square feet or 75 feet of frontage, but as Mr. Gray points out, because it existed prior to February 10, 1938, and on that date, and only on that date, it wasn't in common ownership with the adjoining lot, I think he gets the benefit of the exception. And I don't think this is a variance case. I don't even think this is a special permit case. And I don't know that we have a whole lot to say about a lot of this. I think the question is whether or not it's a separate lot. It's really an issue. And it seems to me it is, notwithstanding the Lindsay case. I don't think the Lindsay case applies. It's a strict interpretation of what the bylaw says, which is why I'm surprised the building commissioner denied it in the first place.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I'm happy to, and I think the fact that it's registered land is really important here. I'd be interested in whether there's a separate tax bill. Yeah, just a sec. But I think read literally and strict compliance on the bylaw, you probably wouldn't get a variance from this board, you know that. But I'm also wouldn't be in favor of a special permit where none seems to be required. And it really seems to me to be a declaration of what the bylaw says and whether that applies in this case. It's really a title case. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the Lindsay case several times. What is that case?
So the Lindsay case was proposed in the application that was submitted by the applicants, Lindsay versus Board of Appeals in Milton. It's a 1972 Supreme Court case, Massachusetts Supreme Court case, about the merger of two lots, and
It really, if I may, Mr. Chairman, it dealt with an issue that was similar to this, where there were two lots that had been recorded as separate lots prior to 1938. At some point thereafter, they were conveyed together to a new owner, and when they conveyed it, they changed the description of the lots to read a single lot. In that case, the court said that the change in the description took it out of this exception in the bylaw. It said it had retained separate, clear legal descriptions of each of the two lots, then the bylaw would apply, and in that case, it would have been entitled to a building permit to build on the smaller lot, which was substandard. And I cited the case because the issue of merger was really front and center here. And,
But it is important to note that this is not a subdivision case. We've had lots of those and denied lots of those over time. This is not an infill case either. This is just an interpretation of whether a lot that is undersized but still is larger than other lots in the neighborhood can be built on. And I think that's what we're here to decide, not whether or not they get a special permit or they get a variance.
I would agree with that.
That's what you're saying, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
I was thrown off by the
The
decision.
1990 decision.
Well, the decision letter by the
Yeah.
Mr. Frondak,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
but I haven't listened to
Yeah.
the reasoning yet. And it's well explained and well laid out by Mr. Crawford here. I think we're in that realm.
So what does the board want to do?
Well, it seems to me if we ruled that this, if we denied, well, no, we're being asked for a variance, right? Or remind me again what you're asking for.
we're asking for...
In the alternative, it was a variance.
A, determination it's a separate buildable lot. B, a special permit if we determine that it meets the lot size where under A and B, special permits may be granted. And C, a variance, because you don't agree with either A or B. But A is what we're really asking.
I think that based on the information in the record, that this particular lot, having maintained, separate legal descriptions, where one, especially when one of the pieces is registered land, which you've got to go jump through a lot of hoops to get, as I recall, it's obvious, there's no merging of the descriptions. They're maintained separately. It would seem that this section applies, and I don't think we have any choice, really, if we've reached that conclusion, that to say that this particular property, that lot falls within this exception, and therefore it can be built on.
Mr. Lobo?
So long as the other, requirements are met.
No, I don't disagree with that. again, just the way it initially presented itself.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of twists and turns, but based on some of the things that have been said here, I think we made the feeling as an exception.
So I agree as well, and I will only say that it seems to me appropriate for the board to issue an order, and I'd recommend that the board issue an order that, in accordance with the strict interpretation of section C3C, it is a buildable lot, given the fact that it fits within the exception consistent with the testimony, but that the two things, that any construction on the lot needs to otherwise comply with every law in the town of Milton, including compliance with the groundwater, whatever the obligations are that are not subject to the Board of Appeals jurisdiction, and certainly subject to the strict compliance of the zoning bylaw with respect to setbacks and the like, and that any building permit would be preconditioned on a demonstration that both lots have an adequate legal recorded ability to park off-street parking in a manner that's acceptable to the town building commissioner. Seems to me to be a reasonable way to proceed.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion to that effect? Or did I just make the motion?
I think you sort of said it.
And do I have a vote?
All in favor of.
All in favor of that? No opposed? Okay. The board will issue a declaration that the lot is buildable lot. You do not get a special permit, nor do you get a variance. You have, yes, sir.
May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
At the risk of, I'm not meaning to, I'm starting again.
Yes.
Not meaning to create any difficulty, but the notice of this hearing was for a special permit or a variance. When I went to check the record today, I saw no indication of this being a title question. And when I spoke earlier, I mentioned that I think it was confusing to me to understand from the description, there's a verbal overlap here, the variance from what I thought was at issue here to what was presented here. So I think that the board has not given, perhaps inadvertently, I'm not criticizing anyone.
Fair enough.
Certainly hasn't given those who object to a variance or a special permit sufficient notice that there was another basis upon which this meeting was going to proceed. And lastly, I did try to state with regard to the one example where there had been allowance, that there had not been an objection, and that the,
Sure.
yeah, so, you know.
Yeah, no, we took notice of your objection. You know, Rod Conley was the chair of this board for many years and was a strict constructionist as well. And I think we took notice on the idea that it's not a variance case.
It's an erroneous
Yeah.
interpretation.
But my question is,
Yeah.
the notice of what we came to address didn't give
Yeah, fair
this
enough.
group
Fair enough.
the opportunity to have an ability to take that question into account and address it tonight.
Fair enough. I will point out that the application does indicate these three, and perhaps the notice wasn't broad enough. Let me ask this. Would it not be, one potential cure to that would be for the board to suspend and reconvene in a week's time, to give you an opportunity, Mr. Doherty, to
Thank you.
develop, and in the meantime, we can advance with the matter. I know that that's an inconvenience for everybody, but it would cure this. What I don't want to create is a situation where out of the box, the town's vulnerable on a decision that could prove to be controversial. And I'm not conceding that the notice was imperfect, but I do think there's an effective cure that we can effect fairly easily. You don't look like you're happy about that suggestion, Mr. Lumber.
Well, other than to say that I don't think there's anything that says that if the building commissioner makes an erroneous interpretation of the statute, of the zoning bylaw, or an inadvertent interpretation, that the applicant seems to have stated his case, the application is part of the record. If the notice fails to mention a particular aspect of this case that sort of developed itself as we sat here in deliberation, I don't think that's a defect that warrants suspension and reconvening. That's just my view on it.
Okay. I think Steve's point's well taken, though, you know, I don't mind coming back if that, you know.
I don't want to create additional burden on the board. I want to...
But I guess in the interest of better safe than sorry, perhaps.
Right.
If it works for everybody, that's what we'll do. I'll be open to that.
The applicant be open to that?
I think we'd be open to it, but I think I agree with Mr. Lundbaum. The application was pretty clear on what the relief that was requested. And I think the board is well within its rights to make the determination it's made this evening. But if it's, you know, pleasure of the board, we'll accede to whatever the board would request.
Well, it looks like this could be one of those cases where we're headed for a little bit of, a little bit more, we could be hearing about this again, and I think it's prudent to cure the defect.
Okay.
To the extent that it exists. And I'm sorry to do that, but I think the board's analysis is right, and I think the case is fairly straightforward. Shouldn't take much time.
Yeah.
And is there a chance we could do it
Next Thursday?
I can't meet on Thursday.
Thursdays? Quiet.
Well, this Thursday especially. A week from tonight is out for me.
How about Monday?
15th? I can do that.
We've got all the conference rooms are booked.
Oh, Mondays aren't good?
Now, Boo's booked, Cronin's booked, and the Baker's booked.
We have another hearing on the Tuesday, but that's probably a pretty full night already, I think, yeah.
Tuesday the 16th?
Yeah.
I have 4 on that night.
Yeah, I think I'm here for some of them, if not all of them.
So I'm here. I'm happy to be here. If you wanted to go 15 minutes early.
Wednesday we could do the Baker, but the week is Baker's so small.
Wednesday? Wednesday the 17th?
I
I'll
can,
be in the Baker then.
yeah, that'll work.
I think it's okay.
That's fine.
7:30?
So the hearing is suspended for the purpose of permitting Mr. Mulhern and his attorney time to evaluate the third request, which is a simple declaration of the interpretation of the bylaw by the board, which is, the board is on record as supporting unanimously. We will convene at 7:30 on the 17th in the basement conference room for the purpose of hearing from Mr. Mulhern. We'll invite the applicant and his counsel to come to the hearing to add whatever testimony they would like. perhaps a little more detail on the parking would be helpful, because it would be helpful to incorporate that into the order, and the board will evaluate the decision that's made tonight at that time and at that place.
Great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. What time was that? 7?
7:30 on the...
7:30?
Did you send a note out on that?